Okay, so today's subject matter is going to be on archery, arrows, and specifically hunting elk, or just in general hunting with a heavy arrow build, what people would consider a heavy arrow build. So so I'm relatively new to hunting, and I can admit that. I have never killed I would say big game animal with my bow, although out here in Colorado, technically a turkey is big game, if you want to go off of technical terms. But, so I have killed a turkey with my bow. I don't know all the specs, but the arrow that I used was very efficient and needed to kill that turkey. It was a lighter arrow, pretty low spine. I used an expandable broadhead for that, which I researched and used that for a very specific purpose, which worked exactly how it needed to. That being said, I have the reason I want to bring up the heavy arrow build is, well, I guess I came about it in an inadvertent way. So a lot of people are likely going to judge me on this, and I have a little story to get into about that. But I started watching The Ranch Fairy, and if any of you know, which a lot of people do and a lot of people judge him, but The Ranch Fairy likes to talk about Dr. Ed Ashby's foundation, the only foundation that actually researches and brings up scientific evidence on archery and penetration of arrow builds on different animals and stuff. So anyway, Ranch Fairy likes to talk about his stuff, and he advocates for heavy arrow builds, using the 12 different factors of penetration when it comes to arrows. Now, my experience, and the reason why I started to create my own arrows in general, is because last year I went hunting with my dad, and we were actually out elk hunting, and we had a target. Well, I hadn't put in my time to practice with my arrows, my build, my accuracy, stuff like that. So while we were out there, I felt very uncomfortable shooting my bow, and I was like worried, truly, that if I were to draw on an elk, I felt like I was gonna wound that animal. I don't think any hunter wants to go through that. But generally speaking, also one big thing, what was happening is I was shooting my arrows, and obviously I had been practicing with my field tips. Well, I hadn't shot my broadheads at all. I had Montech G5. They're the 3-blade double bevel broadheads, which a lot of people will attest to being very good elk hunting broadheads. That's all fine and dandy. I have my, you can kill elk with them, there's no doubt about that. I'm not even going to shit on that brand at all. But with me being a perfectionist and having disposable income and everything, I was like, man, and again, I was shooting these arrows, but they weren't hitting accurately every time. Like, I'd get, it'd be off to the right a little bit, or off to the left, or whatever. I also probably had horrible form. I will say that. I've been practicing a shit ton with my form, and I'm getting a lot more accurate. So This aside, anyways, I had, I felt uncomfortable during the hunting trip. So when we left, and keep in mind, I'm shooting the arrows that my dad gave me, that he had used with his bow. And he hunts whitetail in Indiana. So obviously whitetail are not nearly as big. They're not even as big as the mule deer out here. So relatively small, big game animal, to put it a specific way. But anyway, so he hands me his arrows, and I'm practicing with those, and I'm realizing with those Montecs on them, they're not shooting very well. And so I went ahead and got new arrows. I went to Scheels, and I kind of just trusted their expertise, and they made me some arrows. I think it was like 12. I paid around $200, I think, for 12 arrows. Well, I started shooting those arrows with the field tips that I bought. I don't remember what grain. I know that the arrows were 360 I don't even remember, 320 spine. I'll have to look again, but obviously let's just say they were very underspined, and they were very light arrows, balanced FOC, like near zero FOC, but I was noticing that when I was practicing shooting into a target, I would go and pull the arrow out, and the fucking insert would come out with the, it would stick in the target. I couldn't get the full arrow to come out. The inserts would break off and be left in the target. And I'm just thinking, are you serious? Like, I just paid $200 for these brand new arrows, and there were even sometimes, even when I was practicing with the broadheads on them, there was one time that the broadhead just fucking stuck in the target and didn't come back out. And I was just thinking, are you fucking serious? Like, this is horrible quality. Like, I would not, just from a business perspective, even with a good name brand, Gold Tip's a good name brand, but they weren't working, obviously. And I was really upset about that. I wasted $200, and truly, I wasted $200 for somebody to build me shitty arrows and low craftsmanship. Not talking shit about Scheels. It was just whoever made those arrows. I'm sorry, but they did a fucking horrible job. So I decided to take it upon myself to start making my own arrows, and I went down the rabbit hole. And I came across Ranch Fairy stuff, heavy arrow builds, all the 12 factors of making an arrow, 4 penetration, and long story short, I have near 700 grain arrows with single bevel 2-blade broadheads, and I don't remember, I think I have 17 or close to 18% FOC. But what I'm getting at is, if you, just for an example, is if you are hunting a whitetail in Indiana with a certain arrow setup, would you, how about this? If you are hunting for deer in Indiana with a certain rifle setup, would you take that same gun and frame and caliber and hunt elk in Colorado with that same gun? And I'm sure that literally everybody would say no. And I would agree with you on that. So then why would you take those same arrows that you're hunting deer with and go out into the elk woods to hunt elk? I don't think that this is an ethical thing to do. And I think more people do it than what we realize. So, from what I've understood, doing my own research, is that a lot of people will, I guess, in the archery industry, I'll say, a lot of people focus on speed. There's nothing wrong, technically, with focusing on speed, but with how physics work, I'm not talking just about archery, although archery is the topic right now, but with how physics work, generally, if you increase, which we're talking about velocity, if you increase velocity, you are going to have more resistance. And that is especially true when you have less mass. So people that make an arrow that does not have as much mass and they increase velocity, you may reach the target quicker. But again, even in the archery industry, a lot of people think about what happens when the arrow is at the bow, not when it reaches the animal. The problem with having less mass is that once it reaches the animal, let's say you're shooting 60 yards, once that lower mass arrow reaches the animal, it will have lost a lot of its momentum. And I am speaking about momentum specifically. It may have a lot of velocity, but it's going to lose its momentum over time by the time it hits the animal, especially with a lower mass. Now, everything is going to lose momentum. It doesn't matter how it doesn't matter the mass of the arrow. It's going to lose momentum before it hits the animal. The problem is that if it has less mass, it is not going to have as much momentum. So the whole point, like the idea of killing anything, whether it's deer or elk or moose, is you want to hit the vitals. And preferably, you want to double lung shot that animal. If you can hit both lungs, good spot, that animal is going to go down. And better yet, if you can hit its heart, it's going to go down even quicker, like much quicker. But you want to hit both lungs. You do not want to hit just one lung. You want to pass completely through that animal. But think about that. If you have a lower mass, say if you're hunting whitetail, do not take that same arrow that you're hunting whitetail with and go and hunt elk with it. You may penetrate enough to get to the second lung, and it's going to stick in the animal. But the animal you don't want it to even stick in the animal. The whole point is to get it through the animal, completely get it through the animal. And I know a lot of people, I've already talked to a lot of people, and they're like, well, you want it to get to the animal quicker. I understand that thought process, especially with whitetail and mule deer. I understand that thought process. The problem is that the animal is going to move no matter what. The evidence against that I think is kind of like a fallacy. And again, I'm a relatively new hunter, but I'm like researching this shit. I'm trying to be as ethical as possible. Is that no matter if you shoot a heavy mass or a lighter mass, the animal is always going to move. Well, not always. They don't always move. But if they do move, you're not going to hit the spot that you were aiming at. You can accommodate for if the animal does move. But what I'm getting to is even the lighter arrow at a higher velocity is still going to have issues. It does not matter how fast you are going to shoot it. There is not a significant difference. I know that the numbers seem big when you're referencing the velocity of a lighter arrow versus a heavier arrow, but truly that time difference is not as significant as what a lot of people are making it out to be. I do understand that there's a lot of tuning involved. I get that. I went through a whole year process of retuning my bow to my arrow that I built, and trust me, it's a lot. And again, I purchased a bow press. I purchased my arrows. I purchased everything to, you know, all the glue, the broadheads, the inserts. Like, I bought everything, and it was a lot of money. But one of my other videos, one of my shorts that I was talking about, was doing things yourself. Because the biggest issue that I had, let's just say that it wasn't even the arrow build that was the issue, even though I think it was. The problem is that I did not feel confident in my arrow setup. And I did my own research. I bought all of the products. I learned about what I was doing, and I built my fucking arrow. And I learned how to tune my bow. Now, I may not have all the answers, and I may not be able to tell you exactly what's happening with the arrow flight and all this shit, but at least I did it. And at least I knew what I was doing wrong, and I was able to learn how to fix it. So what I'm getting to is to not always trust an outside source, especially if they are not an expert. I'm sorry, but going to Scheels and just handing my bow over to somebody and saying, hey, make me some arrows, was probably the dumbest fucking decision. And again, the biggest waste of money that I've ever made in my life. Truly. And I'm looking to kill my first elk this year. I think I can do it. I am not scared shitless anymore. Another thing with my arrows, this is based off of the Ed Ashby research and what Ranch Fairy likes to, you know, promote and talks people's head off about, is the momentum. A lot of people think that you cannot get through elk bone, especially on that knuckle, that the ball joint, or the ball and joint, you know, right in the shoulder, the scapula, well, below the scapula. It's the knuckle. A lot of people think that you can't get through that, and that's not true. Obviously, we as ethical hunters are not aiming for that. The problem, again, is that the elk or the animal, whatever you're fucking, you know, hunting for, is going to move. You can assume that it is going to move. You're going to alert it, you know, it's going to stand there and it's going to be on high alert, and it's going to hear you fire that bow, and it is going to move. If you just so happen to hit that knuckle, you want it to go through. You want to blow through that fucking knuckle, and you want to hit the vitals. I'm sorry, but why would you not want that? Why would you want to injure an animal? You are trying to ethically kill an animal, and you're trying to bring it down so that you can harvest it. I don't get the sentiment in people automatically going to saying that that's unethical to shoot at a bone. We're not shooting at the bone. You are likely going to hit the bone. Every fucking ethical hunter is going to talk about, if you hunt long enough, you're going to hit bone. So why, as an ethical hunter, would I not want to make an arrow setup that can blow through that? All I've got to say is do your own research, practice. I know that people are going to have their own arrow builds and what they've used their whole life, and they've killed 1,000 fucking deer and elk with those arrow builds. That's awesome. If you know what you're doing, that's fantastic. And I'm not even talking shit about people that shoot lighter arrows or whatever, you know, like there's a hell of a lot more accurate shots. But I'm just saying, you know, I went to the archery range, or one of the archery ranges around me, and I was trying to explain my concept of the heavy arrows that I built, and I handed it to them, and it just blew them away. They couldn't believe, you know, I could tell that he didn't really say too much. He wasn't, I could tell he wasn't particularly judging me, and he wasn't trying to persuade me against it. But as soon as he realized that I had an arrow that was damn near 700 grains, he was like, I could just tell he was taken aback, and he just had like this look on his face like, what is this guy doing? He even made the comment, what are you trying to kill, an elephant? I mean, truly, I wouldn't trust using that arrow. Anyway, the comment was just kind of funny, you know, I laughed at it, but it's like, why wouldn't you want, like, it's kind of a fallacy question to me. Like, why wouldn't you want to get through a fucking big animal? Like, let's do this right, guys. Like, seriously, let's do this right and not judge people for, you know, doing what they think is the right thing. But anyway, I'm probably gonna make more videos on this. I have some videos of me shooting those arrows for practice. So, but yeah, they're shooting like darts and they're staying on the shot line. Even in crosswind, they're doing a hell of a lot better than my, you know, light ass fucking Twizzler sticks that I was shooting around. So I feel confident. I feel confident that if I come across an elk, that I will be able to pass through it, and as long as I have a good shot, that elk is gonna go down. And it's likely gonna go down quicker than the arrow setup that I had before. So I don't know. This is a long video. I tried not to make it too long, but I had to make it. Thank you. Have a good one.